very sorry.
In my culture, death is not the end. It's more of a stepping off point. You reach out with both hands and Bast and Sekhmet. They lead you into the green veldt where you can run forever.
Chris Scouser here with
Matt Howell.
And featuring super special guest
Robert Yaniz Jr.
That's right. On this episode of The First Run, we are joined by Robert, who is I'll let Robert talk about his show. It's a lot of fun, so we'll get to that in a second. But this week we're going to talk about Bill and Ted Face the Music, as well as The New Mutants. Really, two films in certain capacities I don't think any of us ever thought we'd see. We'll also run down the big releases on physical media, featuring our straight-to-DVD and streaming picks of the week. And then it's the return of our favorite fill-in-the-blank game, TFR Libs. Before we jump into everything, Robert, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, what's your show all about? And thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, of course. So I host the Crooked Table podcast. It's available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, other podcatchers. And what we do is we cover the world of film from a fresh angle. So every episode, for the most part, it's me and a different guest talking about a movie, usually of their choosing. Sometimes like your episode, Chris, that you were just on, it's more coordinated. And that episode, we talked about the first two Bill and Ted's. And then here we're coming to kind of complete the circle. But yeah, so it's a great opportunity for me to talk to other movie lovers and discover movies that even maybe I've never seen, or look at ones that I grew up with in a different prism. But it's really fun, and it's every week, like, you don't know what we're going to talk about. We've talked about Some Like It Hot. We've talked about Parasite. We talked about I have an episode on Darkman coming up, nice. Like cult classics and all kinds of stuff. So it's kind of a grab bag for movie lovers. So definitely check that out, crookedtable.com.
Fantastic. Yeah, it was a lot of fun being on your show. We talked about Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure and The Bogus Journey, and then just perfect indie podcast synergy, if you will. We are now going to discuss Bill and Ted Face the Music. So let's go ahead and hear a clip.
Greetings, my excellent friends.
Do we know you?
I'm Kelly.
Wait, you're Rufus's daughter.
I am, and I've been wanting to meet you my whole life.
It must be very disappointing.
Not at all. We have a problem, gentlemen. Potentially a very serious problem.
About the music?
About the music. They just want to talk to you.
Dude, I got a very bad feeling about this. It'll be fine, Ted. They totally love us in the future, dude.
Dude, our dads are totally in trouble. I feel so bad for them. They've been doing this on their own for the longest time.
Yeah, I wish there was some way we could help them out, you know?
Yeah. But how?
After almost 30 years, Bill and Ted return. Matt, why don't you tell the fine folks on the road, they're on their extremely expensive Peloton bikes, listening to our show, what is Bill and Ted Face the Music all about?
So Bill and Ted are now middle-aged, and at the end of Bogus Journey, you saw Wild Stallions kick off a massive concert. But it looks like that's where they peaked. We quickly find out that their music failed to unite the world, and they're now a couple of also-rans in the notes of musical history. Rufus's daughter shows up from the future and brings them back to the future, where they learn that they have basically an hour and a half to write the greatest song ever written that will unite all the universe, or all of time and space will collapse on itself. No pressure.
Bogus. So, Robert, let me ask you. I'll throw the first question to you then. Is Bill and Ted Face the Music, is it okay to go back home again? It's been 30 years, man. Was this well worth the trip, or should we have left well enough alone?
I was a little hesitant going in. I think, people here on the episode of my show that you and I were sort of like, I don't know, cautiously optimistic about how this is going to work and how they're going to build on the end of Bogus Journey. But I think they did a pretty good job of kind of explaining away how some of that end credit sequence was canon, how these characters would act in real time. being in there, I guess Alex Winter and Keanu Reeves are both in their mid-50s. Actually, we're recording this on Keanu's birthday.
That's
his
right.
56th birthday. So it was a little hesitant to see how they were going to translate that youthful energy to middle-aged men. But I think they did a great job. And, these movies are never aspiring to be high art. They're never going to win any Oscars. There's no illusions about that. It's mostly the energy, the tone, that sort of silly, laid back, positive kind of a nostalgia that this movie's going for. And I think you get that in spades here.
Interesting. Matt, where do you come down?
So I was never a huge fan of the Bill and Ted franchise. I don't really know if there was a lot of call for this, other than the internet's love of Keanu Reeves just in general. I actually had caught up several times because it seems to be playing all the time. Excellent Adventure, although I haven't seen Bogus Journey probably since I watched it the first time and was heavily, heavily disappointed by it the first time when I was much younger. Honestly, even watching Excellent Adventure, I mean, for me, it's kind of an also-ran 80 movie. It's not like a classic, in my opinion. And honestly, I think for this, it's more of the same. It's kind of like nothing's particularly wrong with it, but I couldn't really muster much enthusiasm for it while I was watching it.
So let me ask you then, what would you consider a classic of the 80s in this kind of genre then? So I get a point of reference for you here. Are you talking like your Breakfast Clubs, your
I guess if we're talking like
16
fantasy
Candles?
comedies, probably Ghostbusters would be the pinnacle. Maybe something like Time Bandits if you wanted to go something much weirder, but Back to the Future, obviously, if you're going to go really on the nose with a time travel comedy, all of those have stood the test of time, whereas I don't know if this one, or Excellent Adventure, did as much for me.
I actually had the same impression when I was younger. I really enjoyed Excellent Adventure, but I was very lukewarm on Bogus Journey. But I rewatched both in anticipation of going on the Crooked Table podcast with Robert, and both of them, I think, held up really well. I was surprised, in fact, how much I enjoyed Bogus Journey. I think it's maybe the introduction of Sadler as the Grim Reaper, which is one of the more fun characters in the series. But no, I softened on that. I think I gave it like a B+ for Excellent and a B- for Bogus Journey, but both still in that B range. And for me, I think this thing worked really well. I don't know if part of it is the environment we're in, right? Like, we both really enjoyed Palm Springs, but also because it was just something we could actually just enjoy in all this just never-ending hellscape that we're currently living in, right? That we could actually kind of escape and have fun instead of watching some thriller or some horror film. We're just dealing with the everyday stuff that's going on all around us. And I think that the director, Parasite, is able to really capture the fun and the goofiness, really, and the absurdity of those first two films. It all comes back here, but I think it is updated kind of for an older, maybe more sophisticated audience who, like me, I think still appreciates all of that. And I want to tip my hat, too, to Samara Weaving and Bridget Lundy Payne, who play Billy and Thea, respectively. They're the kids of Bill and Ted. They're Billy and Thea. And I always like, too, that at least one of them has like a bag of Cheetos on them the whole time, which I found quite amusing. But I thought they were quite strong in this, even though I think the film tips its hand pretty early when it says that, well, no, the story says that it's, that it's Logan and Preston who save the world. So I think it's kind of a tell. You kind of know exactly, I think, where the film's going to go, unfortunately, when that happens. But overall, I had a lot of fun with this thing, Matt. I loved Sadler's return as the Grim Reaper. Just how insane that whole scene is when they're in his apartment in hell, and they talk about why the band broke up. And it makes so much sense because so many bands kind of have that issue, but just the absurdity of the whole conversation. And I don't know. It's too bad, Matt, that you didn't seem to enjoy this much as I did. And can we talk about Kahanu there? I mean, this guy's a big star. He could easily have said, I'm not doing Bill and Ted 3. Are you kidding me? I got to make another 7 or 8 John Wick movies that appears at this point. I got to, I don't have time for this stuff. But there's just something about it. And it's just, there's a sweetness and an earnestness in this film that really spoke to me. I don't know. What do you think about that?
I don't know. Why don't we kick it to our guest, Robert? What is your rebuttal to my friend
I'd much
Chris
rather
here?
attack you, but it is a much more the polite thing to do. What do you think, Robert?
Well, I 100% agree with Matt that it is more of the same. I think it's sort of your mileage may vary whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. And yes, obviously Back to the Future is superior franchise. Like I have an episode of that coming up soon, and that is a stone cold classic. And Bill and Ted's not quite up to that level, but I do think that kind of the best you can hope for with these long awaited sequels, especially, is that they're going to tap back into that magic. So we've seen a lot of sequels coming out, decades later, especially comedy sequels that completely drop the ball and just smack of that like blatant cash grab that I think Chris and I were worried this was going to be. And Chris, you were talking about Billy and Thea, and I agree. I think they do a tremendous job carrying roughly half this movie, and I love the fact that it's a third chapter for Bill and Ted, but their daughters basically get the experiences that their dads went through in the first two movies kind of compressed into one movie. They go back in time, they collect historical figures, they venture through, they get sent to hell and all this stuff. Like it's basically the first two sort of remixed and with a nice bow tied on the end of it. And yeah, the story, the big reveal or twist, if you want to call it that, at the end was pretty easily telegraphed, but it was still effective. I mean, it's like I think like you were trying to say, the movie says some stories don't make sense until you get to the end. And so it had that nice resolution. That being said, I hope we don't get a fourth one, because I think this was a nice, as a clear coda to the other two movies. So I hope now they need to leave well enough alone. I'm also a big fan of trilogies, so that's the other thing that.
That's interesting. I think I agree with you on that. I think we're good here. I think we can close the book here on this franchise. But for me, it was a hell of a way to go out. So it's just a lot of fun, Matt, right? This series has always been these two goofball guys just barreling through life, but very earnest, very caring. And all these films, I think, have been pretty filled with heart and love. And I think that's why they've been able to succeed and why it still works after all of this time. So, Matt, I want you to respond to what I had said, and Robert. Since Robert, I think him and I are pretty close, so I imagine we do our letter grades, we'll be close. So I want your thoughts on that. And also, I think if there's any divergence or any sequels, I wouldn't mind, I think, an offshoot of Dennis Caleb McCoy. He's possibly my favorite character in the film.
Yeah. So to start with a positive, I will say that Sadler and Anthony Carrigan, who plays Dennis Caleb McCoy, are, I think, the highlights of this film. They absolutely steal the show. That, like Chris said, the scene in Death's apartment, and then when the girls come in, that whole scene is just hilarious, just talking about the bassist aspect of it. And just Anthony Carrigan, who's absolutely fantastic on Barry as the Chechen gangster that's involved with Barry, which you guys, if you haven't seen that show, you really should. He just steals the show. He's great as the killer Terminator robot. But I don't know. I think for the rest of it, I think it's fair to say that it does kind of get back to the space that the other films have been in. The key to this is, how much did you like those other films? And if you are kind of lukewarm on those films, you're going to be lukewarm through most of this. Winters and Keanu, they're basically reprising the characters they did before. Honestly, they weren't as amusing to me as they were in the past. And as much as I liked Samara Weaving, and as much as I liked Brigitte Lundy Payne was doing with her kind of impression of Keanu's Ted, I don't know. I don't think they really added too much to the story. I mean, the kind of going back and getting a band and everything like that, it seemed like it was kind of tacked on there, and kind of had these two competing storylines that I don't think really worked. I think it almost kind of was a detriment to the two. I would have liked to have seen those four characters spend more time together, as opposed to kind of running two parallel stories.
I disagree.
But
I disagree, Gary.
I mean, that's fine. You can disagree. I just think you're wrong, as you often are.
How dare you? Okay, I think you're right in regards to that. Bill and Ted aren't as funny as they were in the first two films, but I think it's just a natural progression that they're the older versions of themselves, and they've been defeated, right, by their lack of success, at least the failure of the band, right? And they thought they were supposed to do these great things, and it just hasn't shaken out. So I think that's kind of incorporated in there. And I said, I think you do have to update it or mature them, air quotes, a little bit, right? And that's why I think the kids come in and kind of capture a little bit of that magic from them. So, fair enough. Robert, do you have any final thoughts on Bill and Ted Face the Music?
Well, real quick, I want to circle back on something you just said. we talked about in this episode and also on my show about how earnest and positive and hopeful these two characters are. And this movie, Kelly arrives literally when they're at their breaking point, like when Ted is just like, I'm tired, dude. And they were basically about to break up Wild Stallions, it felt like. And it sort of brings them back from the brink. So I think you really do see that weight, that sort of desperation. I mean, with that performance they do up top in the opening of the movie, how they're now gotten to that point where they're trying so hard. They're like, why isn't this happening? Right. And I think that's very relatable for all of us who have aged with these movies to be like, yeah, why haven't I achieved everything I plan to? And the theme that it kind of pivots. Eventually, it pivots to you kind of leading the next generation and helping them succeed, that kind of thing. Because I have a little girl who's 3.5, and so that theme really resonated with me at this stage of my life as well. But as far as closing thoughts, like, I think if you grew up with this franchise, this is a really solid conclusion to the trilogy. As we said, I don't think there needs to be anything said further. I would have liked a slightly longer ending, just because it does kind of come to a screeching halt with I think Thea and Billy's sort of voiceover just being like, and that's how it happened. In the end, I was like, that's it? Okay. But I did find it a lot of fun. I did. Winter and Reeves, much to my surprise, slipped into these roles fairly effortlessly. I think it took a few minutes for me to be like, oh, okay, this is what middle-aged Bill and Ted looks like. But once I got past that, it's a lot of fun. Just, these are silly comedies. So just go into it knowing that they're not going to be hung up on the mythos or how everything is connected. And they kind of play fast and loose with the rules. And I think that's part of their charm.
No, I agree. And I think you do a good job, too, of bringing back... I mean, Ted's dad is in this. Missy returns, right? There's a lot of nods and fun little jokes for any fans of the original first two films, for sure. So, Matt, I'm going to give Bill and Ted Face the Music a B+. What about you? Where are you going?
This may be one of the larger letter grade divergences of the year so far, but I'm going to give it a C+.
Okay. What about you, Robert? If you had to give it a grade, what would you come down with?
Probably leaning to either B+ or B. It's definitely in the high B range. I would put this above Bogus Journey and just, a hair or two below Excellent Adventure if we're ranking the three of them at least.
I would agree with that too. Yeah, Matt introduced something new last week, so I think it's a hard B, right, Matt? It's not quite a B+, but it's a
it's a high B.
It's a 77, right, or 76?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, 86. Excuse me.
86, right? Yeah, it's
not an 85 or an 84. It's an 86. So fantastic! If you've had a chance to see Bill and Ted Face the Music, shoot us an email at feedback@thefirstrun.com. We would love to hear your thoughts. So coming up this upcoming Tuesday, September 8th, in your physical media picks. Listen, there comes a time when a lot of us will have to make some decisions in regards to the relatives in our lives. They're getting older. Would they be better off in a facility where they can get around-the-clock care? Well...
But she's harmless. She's as harmless as one of those stuffed birds.
I am sorry. I only felt... It seems she's hurting you. I meant well.
People always mean well. They cluck their thick tongues and shake their heads and suggest, oh, so very delicately. Of course, I've suggested it myself. But I hate to even think about it. She needs me. It's not as if she were a maniac, a raving thing. She just goes a little mad sometimes. We all go a little mad sometimes. Haven't you?
So getting a 4K release is the Hitchcock Classic Collection. It includes a digital book, Rear Window, Vertigo, Psycho, and The Birds. And also Best Buy has an exclusive Steelbook individual release of Psycho. And includes, for the first time on home video ever, the extended cut of Psycho, which from what I understand is the original theatrical version. and it hasn't really been available or seen since it was in the theaters. I guess there were some changes or cuts made for the television version for home video, and that's a version that's always been available until now. Includes some documentaries, commentaries, interviews, screen tests, and more. I am going back and forth on this, upgrading these films to 4K. I can go either way on The Birds, if I'm being perfectly honest with you, but Rear Window, Vertigo, and Psycho, I mean, that's some top shelf stuff. I'm curious to see what the reviews are on the 4K scans of these, if they're going to be worth the update, though I got to admit, I think I want to see that full version of Psycho. Also coming out on September 8th, Kelly Reichardt's latest film, First Cow, which we will be getting to at some point on this show, includes a Place in the World featurette. A loner and a cook has traveled west and joined a group of fur trappers in the Oregon territory. Oregon. Get it right, folks. Though only he finds connection with a Chinese immigrant. The men collaborate on a business, although its longevity is reliant upon the participation of a wealthy landowner's prized milking cow. HBO's Bad Education, featuring Hugh Jackman, is being released. It's a story about the single largest public school embezzlement scandal in history. The DC Warner animated films continue to roll along with Superman, Man of Tomorrow. If you get it from Target, you get a steelbook. Best Buy features a Parasite action figure. And from what I understand, this is supposed to be a kind of a reboot, sorta, of Superman. This takes place, I guess, when Clark Kent first comes to the Daily Planet. He's just become Superman. Features Darren Criss as Superman and Zachary Quinto as Lex Luthor and more. And includes some new featurettes on some of the other DC animated films, some DC Vault episodes of Superman the Animated Series, and more. The True History of the Kelly Gang is coming out, featuring George McKay, Russell Crowe, Nicholas Hoult, and Charlie Hunnam. Based on Peter Carey's novel, The Story of Australian's Bushranger. Ranger? Is that the term? Ranger. I'm going to go with Ranger. Some people say Ranger. Some people say Ranger. Ned Kelly and his gang as they flee from the authorities during the 1870s. The Big Ugly, starring Vinnie Jones and Malcolm McDowell and first-run favorite Ron Perlman. Anglo-American relations go bad when London mob bosses invest in a West Virginia oil deal in hopes of laundering some dirty money. New to Blu-ray, Criterion is giving us The Naked City, a brand new 4K restoration of this film, featuring a bunch of ported over and archived extras, unfortunately, but it does have that new 4K restoration. Criterion is also giving us Brute Force, film starring Burt Lancaster. We got a new 4K restoration of that, as well as some archival commentaries from 2007, some interviews, and well. Arrow is giving us Graveyards of Honor. Both versions of Graveyard of Honor, the first by Kinji Fakasuka, and then the other by Takashi Miike. Both of them have some new high-definition transfers, new audio commentaries, and a whole bunch of new featurettes. This is a limited edition, though, that has specially commissioned artwork. So if you want to get this 2-disc special limited version of Graveyards of Honor, now's your chance. Arrow's also giving us The Comic. In a future police state, a stand-up comic murders a competition for a job, then gets mixed up with a stripper. Sounds like a typical week for Matt. Brand new 2K restoration of the original camera negative, newly filmed interviews with the actors, and more. Kino Lorber is giving us Daleks, Invasion Earth 2150 AD, which is a film featuring Peter Cushing as Doctor Who. Matt, am I saying that right? It's Dalek, right? Dalek?
I always said Daleks.
Is it Daleks? Robert,
Yeah.
do you have any idea? Are you a Doctor Who fan?
I'm not super familiar with Doctor Who, but I always just thought Daleks. But I have no idea about that
there you
universe.
go. The 1966 film is getting a Blu-ray release. There's the Rob Zombie trilogy is getting a Target exclusive steelbook. So 3 of his films, House of a Thousand Corpses, The Devil's Rejects, and 3 from Hell. We talked about your 4K releases with the Hitchcock collection. Also coming out in 4K is Ghost in the Shell. This is the original anime film. You have a steelbook exclusive to Best Buy, a brand new 4K remaster, Dolby Vision presentation, Japanese and English Dolby Atmos audio tracks, a new full-length audio commentary as well, and more. Your straight-to-DVD pick of the week is Retaliation, also known as Romans. Orlando Bloom stars as Malky, a demolition worker whose life receives a seismic shock when, out drinking with friends at a local pub, he sees a disturbing figure from his past. The man he holds responsible for a traumatic childhood incident. Fueled by anger, Malky sets out on a path of vengeance and discovers that no one escapes the consequences of their sins in this taut thriller. Matt, what should we be streaming this week?
For this week, I'm going to recommend a film that we reviewed earlier in the year. The Lodge is available on Hulu. It is about a woman who is seeing a man whose wife has passed away and he has 2 young children. They drive out to a remote vacation home on a lake in the woods in the winter. He has to abruptly leave her alone with the 2 children when they get trapped due to the weather and scary events occur. It's a rough film. It goes in some directions I was not expecting. So as we approach ever closer to the Halloween month of the month of horror films, this is a good one to get started on.
Yeah, I rather enjoy The Lodge. What about you, Robert? Were you able to catch up with that one with Riley Keough?
I have not. I have not seen that. It sounds interesting though, so I'll have to check that out.
Are you streaming anything right now? Is there anything that you've been checking out?
Well, between recording episodes of my show and watching things for that, I haven't seen that many movies, but I did go back and I don't know if it's streaming anywhere, but I did watch a movie called I Love You, Philip Morris with Jim Carrey and Ewan McGregor, which is really random movie that I think really fell between the cracks. It was a Christmas release in like 2010 or 11, I forget exactly. And it's a really fascinating sort of dark comedy, I guess, about a con man who falls in love with another man in prison and sort of all his shenanigans. But it's a really underrated performance from Jim Carrey. As far as streaming, I've been watching the Harley Quinn animated series on HBO Max, and that's been a lot of fun. I did not have DC Universe, but it sounds like little by little, Warner Brothers is moving a few of the shows over to HBO Max, so who knows what's going to happen with DC Universe, but that's definitely a fun watch. Very adult, obviously, super violent, and a lot of F-bombs, all that good stuff. So if people that were big fans of Birds of Prey, as I was, I think if you're looking for more Harley Quinn, I think that's a great place to start.
Yeah, Matt really enjoyed Doom Patrol. He was watching that. I haven't caught up with that yet. I actually just started watching Hannibal, which is on Netflix. I'm about 4 episodes in, and so far it's okay. All I keep thinking is it just screams kind of like a modern update of Touching Evil, which was that USA adaptation of the British show. It has a very similar visual aesthetic as well as the soundtrack and stuff, so I can't get past that. But I think Mads Mikkelsen is great in it. He's always a lot of fun. So I'm assuming I'll get more into it, Matt. I know you said Hannibal was quite good as well.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I mean, I thought especially the visual style, I'm surprised to say that you feel like it's aping something else. I thought it was a very unique in some of the visuals, especially as things progress and you get into kind of more gruesome murders. They had a pretty gross aesthetic for that show. That's still beautiful at the same time.
I agree with you that the gore and stuff on it is probably the most I've seen, even 4 episodes in, that I think you would see on general television, right? At a major network. But I'm talking about the transitionary stuff, you do the stationary camera kind of looking up and then the night sky, whatever, everything happens and fast forward, really at like triple speed or something. All of these little touches are all stuff I saw. I think what it is I have this unreasonable or weird affection for that Touching Evil show with Jeffrey Donovan and Vera Farmiga. It ran for 1 season on USA. And it had music by Atticus Ross and Trent Reznor as well. So I think it just captured a lot of that. I just see a lot of that stuff. I don't know. Whatever. Either way, I'm sure I'll get more into it.
Well, considering nobody else saw it, that's why Hannibal's so much more.
I've been watching my bootleg copies of it every now and then. You can't get it anywhere, unfortunately. So, good times. Speaking of stuff you can't get anywhere, this next film, the whole film Twitter lore was right that it was never actually going to come out. But thanks to the magic of drive-in theaters, we were able to check out The New Mutants. So let's hear a clip.
It's hunting us.
No, it's hunting Dani.
Why, Dani?
Because that's what she fears. Come on. Help me.
All right, 1, 2, 3.
Take Dani to a safe place, and I'll take care of this bear. What are you going to do? I'm going to play with them. Get her out of here.
thing will kill you.
He's right, it's magic. So am I.
No, Ellie!
Badass. So, what is New Mutants all about? Well, Dani Moonstar is her village, her town is basically decimated by this unseen force, right? And then she wakes up in this facility for younger mutants, you could say new ones, and they are trying to learn how to harness their powers so they're not a danger to themselves and others. And we have Rain, right? Rain Sinclair is Maisie Williams, who is she's not a werewolf per se, right? That's not an accurate description, is it?
No, well, no. I mean, she can control when she changes, so it's not like moon related or anything.
Lycan-esque, I guess.
Yes,
there you go. You have Anya Taylor-Joy as Liana Rasputin, who, of course, is Colossus's little sister, right? Mm-hmm. And we do get Lockheed, which I was very excited about in certain capacities. Charlie Heaton is Cannonball, Sam Guthrie. Alice Braga plays our Cecilia Reyes. She is our doctor, who may be not such a good person. She may be up to some shenanigans. And then, of course, you have Henry Zaga, who plays Sunspot, Bobby DaCosta. And then you have, what do you have there? Yeah, that's it, right? Those are our New Mutants. Is that everybody? That's everybody.
Yeah, that's everybody.
So, okay. So this thing, right, Sony Fox kind of came in and tried to... They ordered some reshoots, and then they realized after test screening that reshoots didn't really work. So they went back to Boone. They said, listen, if you wanted to go kind of a horror movie angle on this, why don't you run with it? And then I guess they had a trilogy set up. Robert, you're a big fan of trilogies. From what I understand, the second film was going to be about an alien invasion and give us a warlock. And the third film was going to be an adaptation of Inferno, if you're familiar with your X-Men comic book history. So this thing has been delayed. It was on the shelf. Then the whole the whole Disney Fox thing went through, right? The purchase. So then it got shelved because of that. And then when is it ever going to come up? What's going to happen with the X-Men? And it kept getting delayed. Then the virus hit. And now it's finally here. So, Robert, let me ask you, was New Mutants worth the wait?
Wow. How do I answer this question? I'm glad that I've seen it because now I admit that it is a movie that exists, that has been made, that was produced and completed. So that's good, I guess. It's also the 13th installment of the X-Men franchise. So I guess that's sort of a dark omen in and of itself. And I feel like even if Disney Fox deal hadn't happened between this and Dark Phoenix, I think they probably would have rebooted the X-Men anyway. This movie was all over the place, and there are things I liked about it, mostly one character in particular, and it's sort of telling that the clip that you played was essentially the best scene in the movie. So I'm sure we'll get into that, but this was kind of a mess.
I think that's fair. Matt, what are your thoughts?
I will say it's not the worst X-Men movie I've ever seen.
No, it's not.
I think that distinction belongs to X-Men Origins Wolverine. I thought this was still better than Apocalypse, so I guess that's something. But it's not good. I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's not good, but it's not the worst thing I've ever seen. But I think it's interesting. I didn't know this was the 13th film, so this is a good thing for... It's a very fitting end for this thing to kind of the Fox X-Men run to end with a whimper on the 13th episode as it gets sunk. So interesting.
Yeah, it's my big thing walking out of this is that it felt not prime time stuff to me. The whole film felt very small, not just in scope, but just the entire story, right? So basically they're all in this facility, and then there's something stalking them that brings their greatest fears to life, right? And we're not sure what that really is. But the whole thing there's no scope for this. I felt when I walked out of this, like maybe they originally were planning on making an animated movie, and then some coked up producer just tossed a bunch of money at him and said, go nuts. Like, it feels like it's one of those straight to DVD kind of animated storylines. There's just no real feel of anything really worth watching. It just, I don't know what it is. I can't really wrap my head around it. Do you guys have any idea what I'm thinking? Like, it just, Robert, what do you think? Matt, Robert, somebody? Help.
To me, it felt like the pilot for a TV show. Like this
Yeah.
felt like the pilot for a Hulu series. And apparently, there's been reports that there was something in the contract that this had to get some sort of theatrical release, and that's part of why Disney didn't just dump it on one of their multiple streaming services. But that's what it felt like to me. I mean, it's only like 98 minutes, 95 minutes, something like that. And I feel like nothing substantial really happens until about an hour in. And that's like when the big threat is sort of revealed and plot starts to move forward. Up to then, it's just establishing all the characters, which if it was the beginning of a TV series, makes sense because that's the goal of a pilot episode. But as a standalone movie, it didn't really hold together for me.
Matt?
Yeah, so what's interesting is that I heard this described initially that it was going to be a combination horror movie slash like 80s teen comedy, like the Breakfast Club kind of thing. And I guess from what I understand, the studio, I guess whatever had been initially produced was like, no, get rid of the comedy aspects of this, get rid of the Breakfast Club, just drop that, make it a straight horror film based off of audience test reactions and stuff. So I feel like what's left is basically part of a movie. Like it was half baked. Like they really weren't planning on making it as dire as this thing is and making it like a true horror movie. And I don't think they were really up to the task to making it. I think that's why it feels so incomplete, because I think they had a different idea of what this was going to be, maybe something more like Scream when they were going in, and they had to change it. Whether that would have been any better, I doubt it, but at least that maybe give an idea of why it feels the way it does.
No, that makes a lot of sense to me. And I will say, I was excited to see these characters on the screen, right? Out of all the different X-Men and there's different mutants that we've seen, we haven't seen any of these people. And they're fun. I mean, they have some cool powers. They're really interesting. And I was happy to see them. But like you said, it's not Origins Wolverine bad. It's not Apocalypse bad. But we're definitely at the bottom, near the bottom rung of the X-Men series. I think there's only really been, 3 or 4 really good ones, right? You have, X2. You have Days of Future Past is good, right?
Logan.
Yeah. First Class is solid. And then...
I think that's basically it. I think
everything else is
you could drop First Class for me. I was not that particularly impressed. I think the only ones that I truly enjoyed were the first 3 that we listed.
Fair enough. So, I will say, too, one thing. Is that it's a little sidebar on this. I actually saw this in the theater. I didn't go to the drive-in. Because I was initially, up until basically a half hour before it started, I was the only one in the theater. I kept checking my app, thinking, you know what? I'm going to do this. If not, I was going to bail and just go to a drive-in. But it was interesting, Matt. Robert, I don't know if either of you guys have braved a theater. I don't think either of you have. I was at the AMC, and it was pretty clean. Everything looked good. Everybody wore their masks, and everybody was pretty far apart. I think the closest person to me was 12 feet apart, and I was all the way up in the back. So I felt pretty good. So far, I'm not dead, but we'll see what happens. I just don't have that much to say about this thing, unfortunately, right? I mean, the relationships between the cast members is fine. There's some brouhaha online on the film Twitter sphere in regards to Illyana Rasputin's treatment of Moonstar and her kind of racist Native American insults and stuff. But I kind of assign that more to just her being a horrible person and not just a reflection of what Josh Boone and the creators of this film series think about Native Americans. But then they also, from what I understand too, that Sunspot is supposed to be Brazilian, but he's supposed to be a black Brazilian person, and he's not here. So, but I guess Boone said he doesn't really care about that stuff. He just wants to cast the right guy, the right person for the right role. So, but they did hire a Native American to play Dani Moonstar, so they didn't, whitewash that at all. But I don't know. Do you get either of you guys hold any stock in that stuff and some of the film Twitter outrage?
Yeah. I thought it was a weird choice. I mean, for Magic to be, obviously she's being portrayed as like the mean girl of the group. I just thought it was an interesting choice if that's the way she went. There are so many other non-racist, ways she could have attacked Dani Moonstar. I mean, You know, you're an orphan now, you know, blah, 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 whatever, however you want to go for it. That was just an interesting choice. And what's interesting, you know, Sunspot, what was so, him being Afro-Brazilian was so intrinsic to his character,
right.
Especially when Claremont wrote it. But if you look at Marvel now, they've been gradually making him lighter and lighter and lighter. Where if you look at him in the new Avengers that he's in now, he's the lead of the new Avengers. He looks like the guy who played him in the comic book. So it almost looks like what Boone did was just looked at Sunspot today and then didn't go back and look at the history of the character.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Robert, do you have any thoughts about any of that stuff? You're welcome not to dip your toe in it.
Yeah, no, I'm not super familiar with these characters. Like, I'm aware that they exist, but I haven't really read the New Mutants comics or anything. So I wasn't even aware of this controversy until, you know, it started becoming a controversy. Mm-hmm. Obviously, I'm all for diversity and representation and all that stuff, but I don't have any particular preference in the way these characters are depicted because I don't have any, you know, history with these characters. That being said, I don't know what it says about me that Magic is like the mean girl, the terrible person, but also the only interesting character in the movie. I mean, the only one that, like, obviously, you know, there's even less of a chance now than there ever was of this being ushered into the MCU or getting any sort of a follow-up, but it somewhat makes me sad that we're never going to see Anya Taylor-Joy as Magic again, because I thought, you know, I'm a big fan of her as an actor in The Witch and Split and all the other things. She's been in so many things. Even just earlier this year, she was in Emma in, again, obviously a completely different role.
Right.
But I like her performance as that character, and I kind of want to see more of her, but I don't think that it's not worth it if we have to bring all this baggage along with it.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, though. And tell me if I'm right, guys. I have done absolutely no research in this, but is the relationship between Rain and Dani, is that the first same-sex relationship that we've had in any of these superhero films? I can't think of another one.
In a mainstream one, yeah, I think that's probably the case. Which, again, that's awesome. So,
yeah,
you know, props to them for putting that in there. I just wish it was in a better movie.
Yeah,
my whole
very
thing.
true.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's. I was like, is this I'm like, this is the first time we're seeing this, and that's good, but it's a shame it's in such a terrible movie as I'm sitting here watching this thing. So
yeah. All right, Jen. So let's wrap it up. What are we going to give the New Mutants? If you have any final thoughts, feel free to share those as well. Matt, what are you thinking?
I'm going to give it a C-. You said it was near the bottom rung. I'm going to say that this is on the very last rung of the middle tier. Like, it's hanging on for its dear life to keep from falling into that final third there. But yeah, I think it's not good, unfortunately.
What about you, Robert? What do you think?
For me, this is in the conversation with X-Men Origins Wolverine and Dark Phoenix as like the bottom three. I'm actually weirdly a mild defender of X-Men Apocalypse as a guilty pleasure. Obviously, it's also a mess in its own way, but it's an entertaining mess. And I was honestly kind of bored by large swaths of this movie whenever Magic wasn't on screen or some crazy, you know, those Smile guys or whatever was on screen. It was happening. I was sort of losing interest. And I saw this at a drive-in. The screen behind me was playing Silence of the Lambs. So every once in a while, I was like, "What's Clarice Starling up to? This is not that. This is not that compelling." So I'm probably gonna go like a D plus. It's definitely in the D range. I'm a huge X-Men fan, and I have just about almost all the movies on DVD or Blu-ray, and I don't really see myself either adding this to my collection or really revisiting it ever. So I mean, I'm glad it's out so we can close the book on New Mutants, but it's not really worthwhile. Not really worth going to a theater unless you're Chris.
That's right. Risking your life for.
Unless you're reviewing it for a podcast. You're like, wait till it does hit Hulu, which probably should have ended up in the first place, honestly.
Well, there's another reason why I was at the theater that day too, but we'll end up talking about that maybe next week. We'll see. But yeah, so I'm going to give New Mutants, I'm with Matt. I give it a C-. It's not the worst film in the franchise. Certainly is not the best. I agree with Robert. I think it was not good, but it was good to see that this thing, to finally see it, right? After all of this time and all of this buildup or lack thereof, And it's going to be, Matt, it's going to be like Justice League Snyder Cut for me. I'm sure it is, right? All this stuff you hear, is it actually ever going to come out? And it's just going to be a severe, crushing disappointment. Well, not that my hopes were ever high for New Mutants anyway. And as we talked about last week, I am officially off the Snyder Justice League train after that teaser trailer. But yeah, no, I gave it a C-, and that's it. It's finally over. The New Mutants book is closed. If you had a chance to see it, shoot us an email at feedback@thefirstrun.com. Let's go ahead then, jump into our final segment and have some fill-in-the-blank fun. Now, one of them, oh God, this movie is so crushingly bad, so enjoy this.
47.
Excuse me?
The percentage of knowledge I have so far recorded, I'm not even half done.
Toth, I only need...
The answer to the riddle of the Sphinx. A child could deduce while you're here. Go ask the riddle and come back and relay it to me. I'll solve it.
One of us would have to die.
Well, draw lots.
Come with us.
Ha!
One night. I'll give you one night.
No, you won't. Set must be stopped before he destroys us all. You see the wisdom in that, don't you?
This is far too important to risk. I can recite the true names of the stars.
I know.
I've seen the world created from sand and water. I contain all the wisdom in the universe, more precious than some crown. Ha!
So that is a clip from Gods of Egypt. Robert, have you seen Gods of Egypt? It is bad. Very.
So I've heard. Yeah, I have not seen Gods of Egypt. I was only able to deduce what that was because you introduced it by saying how bad it was, and because they mentioned Set, and I know he's a character in that. But other than that, yeah, I was spending most of that clip just being like, what the hell is this? So no, I have not sacrificed the 2 hours of my time to that altar just yet.
Nor should you. And the reason why I played that out, because my first fill in the blank for everybody, my first TFR Lib, because that scene actually featured Chadwick Boseman. So, Matt, kick us off. What is Chadwick Boseman's best performance? Or actually, so let me just read it right. Chadwick's best performance is blank.
Okay, so here's the thing. I haven't seen most of his performances, to be quite honest with you. I didn't see 21 Bridges. I haven't seen 42. I haven't seen his James Brown biopic. So I think just by default, I guess his best performance would have to be Black Panther, because that's really the only one I can immediately think of that he was in, that I've seen.
Fair enough. Robert, have you had a experience there with Mr. Boseman?
I'm in the same boat as Matt, actually. All of those movies that you mentioned, Matt, Get On Up and Marshall and all of those, like, I've been meaning to check those out just because I've heard his performance is great, but a lot of times I tend to steer clear of biopics unless it's like an awards contender or something, just because I feel like there's such a tired formula with most of them. But I have wanted to see those because I'd heard he was great, and then I have not got around to it. And now, sadly, I'm going to get to him, I guess, after his death now. So I think Black Panther is still sort of the correct answer in a way, just because it's the one he's going to be obviously going to be remembered for. It's the longest legacy that he's created for himself. I think, he's played a lot of cultural icons, and that's a big deal, but that's more his interpretation of an existing figure. And this was him creating this character for the big screen, character we had never seen before, a character that inspired a lot of viewers, especially in the Black community and people of color. So I think that his legacy is going to be Black Panther, and really kicking off that side of the MCU and that part, representation with that. But that being said, I haven't really even, honestly, I feel bad about saying this, I haven't even seen Da 5 Bloods on Netflix, which I've heard he's great in. And sounds like there might be some sort of Oscar buzz for him, either from that or he has one more film coming out, Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, that again is on Netflix. So it wouldn't surprise me if he gets sort of a posthumous Oscar play for one of those two performances.
That's interesting. Yeah, I haven't seen Marshall, I think the only one. I go back and forth between Da 5 Bloods and 42. The problem I have is that with 42 is that the film itself is just okay, right? It's one of those where his performance actually outshines. Actually, so does Harrison Ford's performance as Branch Rickey is quite good too. But The Five Bloods as a film too is fantastic, and I think in the end, if I have to choose one, I got to go with The Five Bloods. I think I do. Though I loved his Jackie Robinson was actually quite good, but yeah, no, I'm going with the Spike Lee one.
Yeah.
All right, Matt, what do you have?
Okay, so let's stay on this this Black Panther train then, I guess, here. So I'll give you a layup. Blank will be the new Black Panther. And that can be either a character or an actor.
Oh, that's interesting. So you're saying, I hadn't even thought of that. So you don't recast T'Challa, you have somebody else take over.
Right.
Could Killmonger have survived and learned the lessons of his ways?
Who knows?
I mean,
is that what you're going to pick?
That's an interesting story if you can, because part of the issue, right, with Michael B. Jordan's Killmonger is that I think philosophically he had some good points. Right? I didn't maybe agree with his methods, but generally what he was saying was possibly right. So if he could have survived that somehow, vibranium super magic stuff, and he learns and he wants to carry on the legend of the Black Panther, I think that's how you do it. I think they'd do that over recasting T'Challa. I don't know. I feel like that might be the best way to do it, because then you honor Boseman's performance and you don't just recast it. If you were to recast it, I may go Daniel Aiello, maybe? I don't know. I think I go that way. And then you get Michael B. Jordan back in there too, which is just such a dynamic actor. What about you, Robert? What do you think?
Well, I mean, I think we should first we should probably address the fact that there was a big, you mentioned film Twitter earlier, there was a big kerfuffle online with Screen Rant posting an article sort of speculating on this, just literally in the hours after Chadwick Boseman's death. So obviously we were saying all this with all due respect to his family and friends and fans and everybody mourning, but it's also just the reality of the business. There's going to be a Black Panther 2 at some point.
Yeah.
And I think that the best way to go, it's tricky because I'm of two minds of it. I've sort of gleaned that an argument for recasting T'Challa would be to keep that character alive because he is such, he has been so significant for the culture. He's made such an impact on fans and all that kind of thing. Keep that fire burning. But on the other hand, I feel like that's sort of doing Boseman himself a little bit of a disservice. So I tend to lean towards just accelerating what seems like was probably going to be Marvel's plan anyway, and having Letitia Wright's Shuri suiting up in the sequels.
Oh, that's interesting. And I should say too, I said Daniel. It's actually Daniel Kaluuya. Am I saying that right? I blanked. I got their last name wrong in regards to my possible replacement for T'Challa. Yeah, what about you, Matt? You want to continue to dishonor Boseman, and then who would you replace him?
I would say, I think I'm going to split the difference between the two of you. I think, so in the comic, Shuri is the Black Panther. So, yeah. Or at least she took up the mantle for a while. Like, she was found that she was, that she, had the ability or whatever the kind of mystical, comic book hero magic reason is. But I think that would be really interesting if Michael B. Jordan Killmonger somehow did survive and they did make him the Black Panther, but like he still has some things that he has to work out, and Shuri has to kind of replace him or take over or something like that. I think that would be an interesting story to tell, where it ultimately ends up being Shuri.
Fair enough. All right, Robert, what do you got for us?
We talked on this episode about Bill and Ted Face the Music, the final installment, presumably, of the Bill and Ted franchise. We talked about the New Mutants, the final installment, almost certainly, of the Fox X-Men franchise. So if you could revive a now dormant franchise for one final installment, it would be blank.
Ooh, that's tough. I got to think about that. So, Chris, I'm going to kick it to you.
I don't know if this counts, but I guess I would go with the original plan for the Halloween films after Halloween 2. Right? So, because I love Halloween 3 and all of its cheesy 80s craziness. And the plan was to do a different horror film every year after that. right? So one year, so Halloween 3 was witches. The next year would have been like zombies. The year after that would have been like I don't know, Frankenstein's monster, and then a werewolf. You know, if I had my choice with that off the top of my head like that, I think that's probably what I would have liked to have seen. I think so. Yeah, I don't know. Matt, you come up with something?
Yeah, that's really tough. It's extra tough because a lot of the franchises that I thought were dormant have gotten new releases or are being rebooted or have something in the works. So I mean, obviously, Halloween's been rebooted multiple times at this point to varying degrees of success. Terminator's still kicking around, although I think it may be gone.
Yeah, I was going to say, is it?
Yeah, I think it's gone for good this time.
Give it 5 to 8 years.
Yeah, give it 5 to 8 years. Yeah, I would say, God, we're even getting Ghostbusters back. Again, I would say because I'm a big fan of it, and I know how bad most of those have been, I would like to see them take the Alien franchise, just jettison Alien 3, just pretend it never happened, and then everything else after that, and just start over from like after Aliens, and just kind of retcon that continuity. Because I think Alien is fantastic. Aliens is a what me and Chris call, I think it would be in my canon of perfect films. But I think there's still more story to tell, and it's a real shame how badly they've treated that franchise and just how much of a mess it's gotten after every single one that's come out. So I'd like them to just kind of forget all that stuff that ever happened and give me a good, solid Alien follow-up.
They were supposed to do that too. Like there was talk of Neil Blomkamp doing just that. So I don't know if that's ever happening. It doesn't seem like it right now. It seems like it's all Ridley Scott and his Prometheus thing, if anything will happen. But yeah, no, that's a good pick.
Have you listened to that, either of you, the audiobook stage play of Alien 3, which is supposed to be, I guess, what was originally be with Sean Bean coming back in Newt, kind of a continuation after Aliens? I think it's on Audible. It just came out like this year.
Okay. Interesting. I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, I wanted to hear it too. It's supposed to be pretty good. So I think you can get it for like $6-8 or something like that. What about you, Robert? What franchise would you want to bring back?
So I came up with the question, and then I've been trying to come up with my own answer to the question. So some of my answers would have been, I want to see an Evil Dead movie that combines the original trilogy with the remake and sort of creates a little bit of a shared universe there. But we just got 3 seasons of a show, so I didn't think that made sense. Also, again, I said about my trilogy thing, we got 2 Michael Keaton Batman movies, but now he's coming back. Right. So I guess we're sort of getting an unofficial 3rd Michael Keaton Batman movie. So in keeping with the late 80s goofy comedies, before he kicks the bucket, I'd really like to see Mel Brooks do a Spaceballs 2: The Search for More Money. I don't know what that would look like. And obviously, I think he would probably not direct it because he's 90-something years old right now. But I just want to see Rick Moranis back on screen and reprising one of his roles. And that's a childhood favorite of mine. I did a whole series on the Star Wars movies on my show last year, reviewing all 9 of the Skywalker ones. And I actually grew up with Spaceballs before I really even discovered Star Wars. So I would love to see that come to pass. I think the clock is ticking, and I don't know if that would be any good because I'm not sure if either of you saw the animated series that they did for a hot minute about 10, 15 years ago. And it was really bad. It was so terrible. So hopefully it would be better than that. But I would just like to see it happen.
No, that's interesting.
I mean, they could certainly do something with the Search for More Money because that's what we're in right now.
We're in the reboot era to the point that both of you were like, man, everything's being done. What kind of answer to this? Yeah.
What was Matt? What we were talking about? We actually had settled on an Indiana Jones continuation. We've actually found an actor we thought might actually work, and now I'm blanking on who it was.
Yeah, me too.
Damn it.
It wasn't Chris Pratt, was it?
No.
That's everybody's go-to.
No, it was not Chris Pratt.
Oh, I'm blanking on it. And from what I understand, too, John Hamm's going to do Fletch, right? So I don't know.
Interesting.
No property is safe.
No property is safe, seriously.
All right, then. With all the New Mutants talk, gentlemen, Disney will introduce the X-Men into the Marvel Cinematic Universe by blank.
Is that like a year? Like
Well, you can interpret it however you want, but I envisioned it more as like, how are they going to bring them in a series of films? Are they going to show up at the end of one film, or like how do you think they're gonna? Is Wolverine just gonna pop into like a Civil War type thing, or what?
That would be hilarious. Wolverine just drops in, says "Bub, kill somebody," and
what's up, Bub?
And chops on his cigar. Wolverine. Yeah, I guess. So I think. Now this is where I'm getting to the limits of my comic book lore. I know the Eternals is coming up next year, supposedly, and I thought they were classified technically as mutants. So I feel like we could start to see them start to lay the groundwork for that as soon as next year, maybe at the end of like an end credit sequence or something with the Eternals. Although for their plans laid out, most of what they've got coming up is sequels, right? Like Captain Marvel 2, Guardians of the Galaxy 3, Black Panther 2, although that might be up in the air now with recent events. I don't know if there's anything new and original really coming out. And then maybe another Spider-Man movie. And then after that, I mean, it's like, I don't know. I almost feel like we're going to see, from what we know of their slate, that we're going to see, and then a Thor Love and Thunder too. So yeah, they're like all sequels. I think we're going to see I almost feel like we're going to see Fantastic Four and Miles Morales before we see the X-Men. I feel like the X-Men are a ways off. So if we don't see them referenced in Eternals, we're probably not going to see them for like a good 5 years maybe.
Oh, wow. It didn't even occur to me once Holland's contract is up. You're right. They may just go to Miles Morales and not do another Peter Parker one.
Right.
That's fascinating. Robert, what do you think?
I think the X-Men's introduction is going to be much different than Spider-Man's, first of all. I think Spider-Man was sort of a last-minute deal that happened, so they just kind of threw it. I mean, even in that movie, I love Civil War, but it's just completely hard cuts to Queens and without any context or anything. And they're just like, Spider-Man, here he is. I think it's going to be much more gradual than that. I think they're going to start sprinkling it in probably in the latter half of Phase 4, but I have this theory/fantasy that they're going to use the Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness film to actually acknowledge that elements of the Fox movies exist within the, not within the MCU, but like on an alternate plane of existence, sort of doing what DC is trying to do. That way you can get Hugh Jackman in a Wolverine cameo, just to acknowledge, hey, he existed, he's his own thing. Now, eventually we're going to bring in our own Wolverine, but don't be pissed about it, comparing it to Hugh Jackman, because we acknowledge that's on another Earth and another timeline or whatever. So I think that there's rumors that Evan Peters was brought on for WandaVision. I think you can use Quicksilver maybe to be some of that connective tissue. And I would really like to see Daphne Keene's X-23 sort of brought in. So I'm kind of in my head, it's going to be a gradual introduction, but I'd love to see them toy with the multiverse stuff a little bit, just to bring over some of those characters that are established. The Quicksilver, Deadpool obviously doesn't exist in a world of his own. And X-23, rather than rebooting everyone from scratch, I think take elements. And I would love to bring Magic along for the ride, but it's not worth it to deal with all of that. Sort of whetting fans' appetites for when they eventually do bring in Scott Summers and all that. And there was rumors about Storm being brought in Black Panther 2. I don't know. Again, that's a huge mystery now, what that movie's going to even look like. But I think it would make sense for them to, little by little, sort of bring these characters in and then build to a team up, not in overtly as a way as they did with the Avengers, where everybody gets their solo movie, but kind of appearances throughout, like more with the way they built up to Black Panther, where Ulysses Klaue showed up in Age of Ultron and they mentioned Wakanda and they kind of took a trip there basically, or not there, but like adjacent, and then T'Challa showed up in Civil War. I think they're gonna build it piece by piece before they get to a big team up movie.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think that'll exactly be what it'll be like. It'll be the Infinity Stones all over again. There'll be little teasers here and there and Easter eggs, filtered throughout the films, and then eventually, like in 2-3 years, maybe 3 years, 2-3 years, we'll get, well, who knows with the virus, we'll get a full introduction, maybe, and get a full X-Men film.
Yeah, it feels like Phase 5 will be more of the mutant-centric part of the franchise, though.
There you go. Agreed. Matt, you got another one for us?
Yeah, so I was just interesting. I was looking while you guys were talking. I was looking at this at the list here of everything that's scheduled to come out to 2022. The only one that are showing characters that we've never seen before, whether it's not a sequel or Black Widow standalone film, are the Eternals and Shang-Chi next year, and that's it. everything else after that is a sequel. So it'd be interesting to see how that all plays out. All right, so since we talked about that, I will skip over my X-Men question because it was pretty close to that. So let's talk about the year that was and the year that maybe could be. So 2021 will be a blank year for movies.
I don't know. See, we still don't know what's going to happen. So Tenet comes out wide this week.
Mm-hmm.
And then Bond's still supposed to come out. Wonder Woman 1984. There's also still a chance stuff still gets pushed back, right? There's like Kingsman got pushed back to 2021 last week, right? So
yeah, let's see. I'll look at the. Keep talking. I'm going to look at the.
I'll say it will be just a overstuffed year. All of this, instead of kind of have, every week is going to have some big release instead of having, some middling stuff. And that's with the caveat that the theaters are entirely safe and everybody feels okay to go back.
Mm-hmm.
I think some stuff will continue going forward to get an on-demand only release, potentially. Maybe there'll be joint stuff at some point. I don't know, but I think it will be an overstuffed year next year, as long as, we're not all dead. Robert?
My first instinct was to go to overstuffed or overcrowded first, too. But I think 2021 is going to be a transitional year for movies.
Nice.
Because I think we're going to see the industry evolve more towards streaming, possibly less towards theaters. I think it's going to be interesting to see what the future looks like. This has been a sort of, obviously for multiple reasons, unprecedented period for the entertainment industry. And I think they're finding new ways and they're experimenting with ways to get movies to audiences without having to put everything on hold for a year. I mean, look, we have Disney releasing their, $200 million Mulan movie on streaming for $30, but then also being like, don't worry, it'll hit your Disney Plus account in December. So the entire business model it feels like it's shifting drastically thanks to the pandemic, I guess. So I'm really 2021 is going to be the real test of what that's going to look like beyond that. I mean, obviously, I think we'll probably always have some movie theaters for the big blockbusters, the Marvel movies and the franchises and stuff. But I wonder if there's going to be fewer of them, if it's going to be like how things are going to shake out when all is said and done. And I think next year is going to be the big test for that.
Yeah, that's a really good response. I like that way better than like Chris's response because I think it's 100% true. Sad. I would have gone with the positive side of Chris's response. I would have said exciting because, to your point, whereas it could be viewed as overstuffed, I think it'll be interesting, especially if some of the big movies that are still set to come out this year, if they do get pushed back. If everything kind of goes to plan, can you imagine we're actually going to have some good films in January for a change? Like, we're not going to have that first quarter crap that we have to sit through. So I think that's really exciting. But I think you're absolutely right. It'll be a real litmus test to see how the rest of this year goes, because looking at what's coming up, I mean, once October hits, you've got, of the movies that I would still risk to go out to the theater to see beyond, leaving Tenet to the side for the moment, you got Wonder Woman 1984, Candyman, just because that's me, Black Widow, No Time to Die, the new Pixar with Soul, and yeah, it's basically Dune. I would definitely go see Dune in the theater if that still actually ends up coming out in December. But I could see all of those films getting pushed back to 2021, depending on how well Tenet does. And I don't know how Tenet's going to do, so we'll see. And versus how Mulan is gonna what that's going to do as well. So yeah, this will be really interesting. I think if things improve, I think next year has a real chance to be like a really just solid, fun. You have kind of like a wealth of films that you normally wouldn't have available when you wouldn't normally have them. But that may be just me being unusually positive, out of character positive.
That's right. All right, Robert, you got one more for us?
I do. So in addition to being obsessed with trilogies, as we keep referring to, I guess that's sort of my my gimmick this episode, I'm really big into award season, which who knows what the hell that's going to look like coming up. So I'm going to ask you two gentlemen, the 2021 Academy Award for Best Picture goes to blank.
Jeez.
Jeez. The New Mutants. It's going to be nominated. Because
Might as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, things have not been great, right, so far this year. Because all the big stuff has been pushed back. I think, is the best film I saw this year Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always? It might be. So I guess I'm going to sit on that, but I think that's what I'm leaning towards. Matt, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a really solid contender. I think right now, just based off of what I've seen, it would probably be maybe The Five Bloods would be a contender. First Cow, which at least made it into theaters, has gotten some buzz, so maybe, but it's going to be really interesting to see what even actually makes it into the conversation, because some of these, like the Five Bloods, they didn't come out in theaters, so I don't know if that automatically takes them out of the running or not. It's going to be really, really interesting, because I'm looking at a list of the best films of 2020 so far, and Capone is listed as 19, so that should just tell you what 2020 is like for films that are available. But yeah, I would say either Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always, or maybe The Five Bloods, or The Five Bloods, and maybe The Assistant as like a dark horse just nomination, maybe. Yeah.
We haven't seen where it's on our list though. Like First Cow is on our list, and we haven't seen the one Robert you mentioned, Emma, the Anya Taylor-Joy's film too, which I guess could be a contender. We haven't seen it yet. What do you think?
We haven't seen The Vast of Night yet either, which is supposed to be really good too. Sorry, go ahead, Robert.
It's okay. My answer was actually going to be The Five Bloods for a number of reasons. I haven't gotten a chance to see it, even because it's 2.5 hours long. I have a toddler running around. It's not exactly the kind of thing my wife and I will want to watch on like Friday night, hanging out with like a glass of wine. Right. So I actually need to catch up with that. But one, Spike Lee is now officially broken into the awards mainstream thanks to Black Klansman. With everything Black Lives Matter and everything happening this year, it feels very sort of relevant culturally. And plus, then you have the Chadwick Boseman of it all, and the fact that everyone is probably going to be paying more attention to this movie now because it is his penultimate performance. So that's kind of what I think. Even if it doesn't win, it's going to be definitely nominated. And one of the big ones people are talking about. It is a Netflix movie, but Netflix also almost won Best Picture a couple of years ago for Roma.
Right.
So I think it's sort of feels like everything the last few years have been building up to a potential win for this movie.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. All right. Let's close it out then, gentlemen. Christopher Nolan insisting that Tenet get a theatrical release. Whoop, let me reset that. All right, gentlemen, let's close it out then. Christopher Nolan insisting that Tenet get a theatrical release is blank. Robert, why don't you go ahead first as our guest?
I have a little bit of two minds about this. On the one hand, it's questionable whether or not that is safe, obviously, right now. So I would prefer him to defer more to public health than this is the way my movie needs to be experienced. But on the other hand, I think we need filmmakers with that kind of pull to to draw a line in the sand and defend the theatrical experience. As I was just saying a few minutes ago, I feel like 2021 is going to be a transitional period for film, and I really like going to the theaters way more than streaming movies at home. I'm old-fashioned that way, I guess. And so I appreciate Nolan putting his reputation sort of quasi on the line for that. It feels like he's being so insistent on it that now it's making me want to rebel the other way and be like, dude, it's not time yet. Just pull it from the schedule or something until it is safe. And instead of kicking it down like they did for months, like Warner Brothers is also doing it with Wonder Woman. I think it's a Warner Brothers thing more than anything, honestly. But yeah, I appreciate that he's standing up for the art form and trying to encourage people to go to theaters. But to what cost is my question.
Yeah. So I'm just gonna put it out there. You're gonna have to put that explicit tag on this. I'm gonna say it's bullshit. I agree with Robert in the sense that it's going to be somebody has to be the kind of sacrificial lamb to see, whether it's safe to go back to the theater and see if there's any juice for people to go see these things. Because let's face it, if Tenet doesn't do well, they're going to push back Wonder Woman into 2021. They're going to push back Bond. They're going to push back all these massive films. Maybe not Dune, or at least to like the end of the year. They're not going to, if nobody goes out to see it, they're not going to kind of risk it. That said, I just think the fact that Nolan absolutely refuses to have any conversations of distributing it in any other format, like a drive-in or something like that, to kind of make it more safe for people, I think is just really the wrong message to send. He's gotten this reputation as this kind of prima donna where it's like his way or nothing. And that's really starting to grow old with me as far as how he goes. I don't think it's worth it necessarily to kind of force people to make these choices, which is just messed up. That being said, who knows? Maybe I'll end up seeing it. I'm leaning more and more to going to see it at that point. Because Chris isn't dead yet. And
That's right.
I know a couple of people that I was on the Screen Fix pod to talk about the New Mutants, and the lady Juan and JC, they're not dead yet either. So, I mean, they went to the theater, so we'll have to see. We'll have to see how you guys fare in awful Florida down there.
Yeah, I mean, you're taking your life in your hands just walking out the door. Robert's here in Florida as well.
Yep.
So
I can vouch for that.
Gators. I mean, you never know what's going to happen. Mosquitoes the size of cats. So I think it's ridiculous. Push it back, or at least give people the option to watch it from home. I get there are going to be the idiots like me who go to the theater and watch it. I went to one of the early access screenings in the Dolby Theater, and it was sold out, which terrified me. Now, granted, there were empty seats all over the place. I had an empty seat in my right, 2 empty seats on my left. And the Dolby Theater has that high back wall, right? So you don't actually have anybody, you can't really see or experience anybody behind you. Nobody coughed once. I was like keenly aware, like listening the whole time. Everybody had masks on for the most part. Then when I looked around, it seemed pretty safe for the most part, I think. I don't know. And I can tell you one thing. I'm dying to talk about this thing. So we'll have to see if Matt ends up going or what happens here. But yeah, but I do think it's ridiculous that he's sticking to this, and it's selfish, and it's too bad. But thankfully, he has idiots like me. So
yeah, that's right. No, and that's the thing. I mean, you can only roll the dice so many times, So I mean, maybe you're fine with Tenet, but then maybe more and more people. Well, I was fine with Tenet. Now I'm going to go see Wonder Woman, and then that's the one that like blows everybody up,
Yeah, and I'm with you. I think it's maybe we do go film by film. Like there's some stuff that's coming out that we do not have to go see in the theaters. I think that's totally fine with me.
Yeah.
But I want to see Tenet again, but I will not see it in the theater again. I'm not going to push that. I'll wait for it to come out on home video before I rewatch it. That's for sure.
There you go.
So
yeah, choose wisely, Chris.
Yeah. Yeah, my whole life's been made up of that. All right. So how would you answer these? Fill in the blanks. Shoot us an email at feedback@thefirstrun.com. We'd love to get your responses. Do you have any suggestions for TFR Libs? Hit us up and let us know. So again, Robert, thanks again. Where can people find you?
You can find more episodes of my show on crookedtable.com. You find me on Twitter, Instagram, @crookedtable. Pretty much all over the place. Just, let me know what you guys want to hear on the show, and I can probably make it happen. So, and Matt, we need to get you on now.
Oh, okay. Yeah. See, that's how I like to do it. See, Chris goes and does a show,
yeah.
then I show up a little bit
he
later,
goes to the movie theater to see
more.
Tenet. He's just the resident guinea pig. I get it.
There you go.
Very nice. Fantastic. All right. So as always, you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. Do a search for The First Run. Scroll. Eventually, you will find us. Go over to Apple Podcasts and give us a review to help other people find the show. If you haven't done it, go over to Crooked Table Podcast and give them a review as well. Check out their website and all the other fun stuff. So that's it, folks. We're going to go ahead and take an extended break, and we will see you all soon. Take care.
All we are is dust in the wind, dude.